So I'll share this screen. Jamie, as always, just jump in whenever you need to, really, for this. So can you see this? Am I on? Are we good?
Yeah, good to go.
Cool. So guys, just a quick one then. What we'll cover today: training load, injury considerations, what we need to consider, physiological considerations for adaptation. That one more for me. It's really simple for you in terms of the way that we're going to put it across. It's just some things that you need to be aware of that creates the actual change. You know, like Jamie spoke about this a week or two ago on one of the Facebook Lives. And realistically, it's trying to get to the point of just doing exercise and just training isn't enough. We need to, and we can, look at it beyond that, look at it in a bit more detail and have a look at, well, what creates us the opportunity to move forward. Look at training versus recovery in terms of the two sides of the same thing. Stress and stress management, sleep considerations, sleep management. And we've had some questions this week, which again, we'll cover at the end. That is, how do I adjust my calories to fit my goals? Do I need to refeed after training sessions? Jamie, you might have some more, by the way, on this, questions-wise. We'll get to it if you do.
I just had, it was pressing. It was someone swore on it, so I won't say the swear word. But he said how to cope with living with 4 females. I'll let you guess who it was.
I wonder who that could be. I get pain doing certain exercises, so should I stop training or should I carry on just going as normal? Which was how it's been worded with 3 or 4 people actually this week. So I want to cover that. Do you need to do phase 1 in this training plan? That's a yes. I'll just answer that now. If you don't do phase 1, then you are not set up to do phase 2. Realistically, regardless of how fit you are, some of the movements are new, and I wouldn't want you going into some of these new advanced movements without doing phase 1 first. Adjusting the workouts, adding weights and things like that to the sessions. So we'll talk about that at the end. What I want to get into today is this entire picture of stress, sleep, and recovery from training. So supercompensation theory, I don't know whose image this is, but it was a really simple one to try to show you what we're doing. So in training, we sort of look at, there's a couple of different theories, fitness fatigue and things, but this is a really simple one to look at, to be considering when you're looking at your training sessions and when you're looking at your training response. And basically, when you're training, that's the thing that's creating the stimulus. So that's creating the fatigue. So if you are ignoring recovery straight away, if we were to take that side of the equation out of your training journey and you were to just not pay attention to it at all, you will continuously get less and less fit, less and less able to do what you're trying to do, which obviously is not the goal. What this shows quite well and quite simply and quite sort of easily is, if you look at the red line, that's sort of where we want to be. We want to train hard enough to create that stimulus, but then give ourselves a chance to recover so that we are back not just to baseline, but beyond it. We are fitter than baseline. If you look at the dotted line, the training too hard, that basically shows that we just haven't been able to get enough training frequency in there. We've battered ourselves. We've not been able to move for 10 days. And you've just not been able to train enough because of whatever reason to actually create any fitness adaptation. And obviously the first line is that you've trained, it's been pretty easy, but you are ready to go again pretty quick. There's not a large training effect from that. So you need to, in theory, train either more often, or obviously there might be other reasons that you do that. But in reality, the main sort of thing that I'm trying to get across with this slide is just to allow you guys to see this. And this is going to come up as we talk about stress, as we talk about sleep, as we talk about recovery throughout. So I wanted to bring it up straight away and just show you that when you're training, we're focusing on this sort of first bit here up to this point. I don't know if I've got a pointer on here that I can get. I might not.
It's not to get off when you build it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. But we're looking, the training session is this bit. It's where you're breaking down. It's parasympathetic dominant, and it is your body working, breaking down. What most of you want is to either get fitter, get stronger, get leaner. You want some sort of adaptation from that training. And to be honest, that's what we want for everyone. I would never write a plan with just thinking about using energy and just thinking about training. We always consider recovery, which is obviously this bit. And that is, to be honest, in most cases, and in the grand scheme of training sessions and training plans, that is at least as important a factor to consider as the training itself. And I think that it's one of the key things that gets missed. Bigger picture, when we're looking at how you get fitter, how you get stronger, how you adapt to these training sessions, that's the thing that's neglected most, and that's the thing that stops people from moving forward in the gym. So again, looks more complex than it is. Or it might do, it might not. But again, just trying to sort of put this out straight away that when we train, we are creating the stimulus. When we then recover from that training, that is the adaptation. That's the getting fitter. That's the getting stronger. That's the getting leaner, whatever we want to do. Body composition a little bit different, but when we look at hormonal considerations, type considerations, and everything that we'll go into today, it's actually not that different at all. We still have to consider this recovery time because that's going to have a huge impact on how much muscle you build, how well you're able to sort of tap into body fat stores, what energy systems you're using, and so on.
I think it's important for people to understand. I mean, I know it sounds quite complex, all this for people. Talking about super compensation theory. As soon as you say a word like that, I think it scares people thinking that we're talking quite complex, and we talk about compensation, and we talk about all these sort of words that we understand, but not necessarily everyone. So, guys, just to let you all know what we're actually trying to say here. I presume that you can't see my pointer, can you? Because it's your screen. But what we're trying to say with the red line is that there is an optimum for training, certainly the right level for you, and that's where the red line is what is the right level for you, where you at, and what do you need to be pitching it at. A lot of people look at training as like just work as hard as you possibly can, as long as you can, and give that 100% effort every single session without any thought as to quality of movement. I think that was one of the things. You're on these webinars, so you should understand a little bit. But what we're trying to say is that there's always a preferred, always our best option, and that's really what we're getting at there, isn't it, Josh?
Yeah, cool. So just turn this volume up because I can't hear you that well. Right, cool. So guys, moving on from that. It's not really moving on, it's the same thing. Performance considerations. So when we're looking at training and recovery, what do we need to consider from a performance point of view? Well, training provides a stimulus. Now, this is far more, and I always sort of make a big point of this. You can forget about calories from most perspectives because it's just not that important. It's only important sort of looking at what we're trying to get from the session. Are we fueled enough to do it? In every other aspect, the training session itself isn't that important in calories because at the end of the day, for most of you, it's going to be 30 to 60 minutes, somewhere in that range. And the total calories that you're going to burn throughout the day, throughout the week, come down to a hell of a lot more than what's burnt in the training session and what training modality you use. Yes, there are better and there are worse ones to do, but there's also loads of other ways to use energy, loads of other ways to control that. And at the end of the day, we can eat less calories or eat more calories, which is going to have an impact on body composition as well. So you're always trying to get another stimulus. You're always trying to create, a muscle building stimulus, a strength stimulus, or some other energy system and fitness adaptation. Now we need to consider these sort of three areas: the nervous system. What's going on with the nervous system? We need to consider the actual muscular system, the muscles, in terms of what we're trying to stimulate, what we're trying to create, and what's that going to take from a recovery perspective after we've done that session. If it's quite an easy session from a muscular perspective, you're probably going to be ready to go as soon as your muscles are, or pretty much as soon as your muscles are refueled again, or almost ready to go. And then same in terms of energy system considerations. How much do we have to consider? Now, all of these are completely interlinked. Every session that you do will have some level of muscle damage, some level of nervous system fatigue, and some level of energy system considerations in terms of you've used a certain energy system, you've used some fuels from one system that need replenishing before we can redo that. So we need to consider that from a performance point of view. Now, from an injury point of view, there's different considerations. And again, guys, I apologize if this sounds complex. I wanted to chuck all this out straight away before we get into stress management, sleep management, but I want you to understand why it's important. So from an injury considerations point of view, we've got to look really, this isn't a one size fits all. This is what can your body currently tolerate? What are you doing at the minute? What do we know is a sort of safe level for you to do? And your body will, as an adaptation to training, be able to tolerate more. The amount of work that you can do will go up. The flip side is that if you still want a performance benefit, you still want to get fitter, get stronger, and develop as we go through this, the amount of work that you need to do needs to go up as well. So that is an adaptation to training, but the fitter you get, the more you have to do to continue getting fitter in reality. But your body should be built to be able to withstand those higher loads, higher volumes, because that is adaptation. We've got to consider acute workload and chronic workload. You can talk about the ratio for this, but I'm not really going to. I'm going to make it dead simple in terms of if what you're doing right now is a hell of a lot more than what you're usually doing, then there could be issues coming up from that because you are potentially under recovering and there will be some issues that come up. Again, more work and a lot of work is not necessarily a bad thing from an injury point of view. Too much too soon obviously can be a problem. So guys, again, just framing this in the context of what are you trying to achieve in that training session? And again, if you're just trying to achieve in your head, if you think that you're training to burn calories, there's a hell of a lot more to it. And there's a hell of a lot more that your body is having to deal with during that training session than just burning calories. And you need to understand that. And this is why, going out for runs every single day, if that's not something that usually fits in your routine, is going to be an issue. Or why doing, 4 or 5 sessions a day might just simply be far too much for you to get any adaptation at all in reality from what you're trying to do, because long term, it just won't give your body that opportunity to recover. Now, we'll talk about different methods later. Some things that I just want to cover is that, recovery, we can look at it on a couple of different levels. The first level is recovery during your training session. So this is when you're in the gym, your sets, your reps, how long do you need to rest for? What we see is that a hell of a lot of the time, people don't rest for what would be recommended rest time for that type of training. So say you need to rest for 2 minutes minimum to get functional hypertrophy response, and you're resting for 45 seconds. Well, then you can't lift the same load for the same amount of work. So, these, although you might feel like you can, what it probably means is that there's technical breakdown a little bit sooner. So we need to consider all of these factors in terms of how much rest time do you need during that workout. Now, we apply this to home workouts and we apply this to the types of workouts that we're doing at the minute. What you'll probably notice is that because the reps are a little bit higher, the time under tension is certainly a lot higher and the rest time's lower. But we're just trying to hit different systems. We are trying to get a different response to what you might be used to in the gym, doing a set of 5 and then resting for 3 minutes. These different responses might be more focused on other adaptations, focused on different types of hypertrophy, different types of fitness, but they are still targeting that. If we were to then shuffle that over into, right, well, I can cope with this, so I'm going to do less and less and less in terms of rest time, and that's going to get me a higher effect. Well, it's not. It's going to get you a different effect. So if you are doing less in terms of overall rest time, the effect from that training session then shifts from something that's predominantly focused on, realistically, on trying to sort of stabilize your joints, build a little bit of hypertrophy, and get a bit of a training response from that side, from the strength side of things. Well, if you shift it all the way over and go, right, well, I don't need that much rest, so I'm going to have far less. Yes, you might still get a bit of a metabolic effect, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a different effect. You are going to start to move it towards the cardio systems, towards aerobic training, which again is different, and you're not going to get the muscle growth response. Guys, again, recovery within the microcycle. So when I'm looking at this, the day-to-day sort of throughout the week, so not just a session, but here, in sort of 1 peak microcycle, what that's looking at is basically where you're peaking in that week. What's the main session that you want to be fresh for, that you want to be sort of 100%?
So, guys, microcycles are the actual day-to-day of a workout. I'm just trying to explain like the work. I know I'm just listening in, obviously. I think that some people have got to put this into context. If there's anything that you guys don't understand, I hope that Josh is explaining that. I understand it, and I hope you do. But if there's anything that you don't understand, just drop questions in, and hopefully we'll get towards them. We'll get to them at the end.
Guys, I do want questions coming in for this. But basically, the key point of it is that, again, you are not going to train 10 out of 10 every day in the week. If you do, then your overall picture that's within the training phase needs to again be different. There's not a photo of that. But if you go 10 out of 10 every day for 7 days, well, your performance is gradually going to be declining and declining and declining, which means that you are not going to be working hard enough. If we drop to the last slide, sorry, that you actually don't respond to fatigue. We don't respond to, just because we're knackered, yes, overeating and overload is a thing, but we are not responding to the fact that if we are driven into the floor and you just, you know, usually you can run 10K in 50 minutes and you're doing it in 53 and 53 and 53 and 53 because you're constantly under-recovered, constantly not giving yourself a chance to adapt. That is going to absolutely wreak havoc on your performance and on your fitness.
I think for some
so
people,
guys, you know,
I think for some people,
on,
one of the things that you've got to consider is just because something's been going on for a long time, we're talking years. You could be sat here thinking, Josh, yeah, but you know, I can run 10K a day. I can do, I don't know, exercise every day, and that's how it has been for years. What we're actually saying is that there's opportunities for everybody, every athlete that we work with, every weight loss client that we work with, every recovery rehabilitation client that we work with. There is opportunity where most of the time recovery is seen as one of the little things that's not really going to drive you forwards, when actually, in fact, the majority of the time, it's things like planning your recovery, your rest, your sleep and stuff like that, that actually hinder your progress. You know, yes, you could be very fit. Yes, you could be training every day, but you could be getting more out of that session should you do it at a slightly different time, should you move rest days or recovery sessions and stuff. Hence why, guys on the whole workout program, hence why the workout strength B, I think it was a bit more focused on the mind-muscle connection. And then you've got one that's like a high intensity one, you know, hence why some of these workouts, yes, they're not as hard in terms of sweating and in terms of like jumping around or whatever, but that does not mean that there's not as much of a need for them sort of days. You know, it's really important that we sort of get a good mix of all that. Yeah.
Yeah. Alison has just dropped a really good question in. How long should you recover for? So looking at colours on my zone and things like that. Now, this is pretty much the key. Alison, the reason that it's really difficult to understand is that if we had a definitive answer for that, if I ever come up with it, I will solve everybody's training questions and I will get everybody to win every Olympic championship that they go to, if they are physically capable of it. That's the way that you maximize your training. Is that the way that we get the most out of training is we balance this perfectly. We get the right training stimulus and we recover for the perfect amount of time. So it's an educated guess almost. We look at what your body's actually telling you, and we also have to look at physiology. This sounds complex the way that we're going through it, and it sounds complex because there isn't really another way that I've figured out how to get this across to people in terms of it is complex. Physiology, you know, the way that our body works is complex. The way that we respond to training, the way that programs need to be designed. We can keep bringing it down level by level by level, but the more we do that and the more we sort of take a level out to give people an answer, the more for me, the more risk it puts into people misunderstanding what we're actually saying. So that's why it comes across quite complex.
And I think let me jump in, Josh, because obviously I train you. And just for those of you that didn't know it, said don't understand how long you should rest for. Does that make sense? Which, yes, it does, because you know not everyone knows how long to rest for. And should I watch my zone basically and sort of try and go off how intense the session is? Well, first thing on the zone is just because a heart rate is high, that is absolutely not an indicator of how taxing that session is on your body. You know, high heart rate. I do burn classes with people, and our burn classes, you know, part of that is to work through your heart rate zones. And once the heart rate zone is high, we actually know that in some of those sessions, recovery is much quicker than in a really low heart rate session, but we're on a squat rack doing 3 reps of heavy. Now, for someone like Alison, just to put a bit of context for those of you that don't know, Alison does quite a lot of running. You know, she trains quite a lot in the gym when she's in and things like that. And now, the good thing for Alison is she's got me as a coach. The first session in the week is and we will look at, I'll say, how are you? How would you run? How are you feeling? Are you stiff anywhere? Is anything going on? How far did you go? How fast did you do that run? What happened? How did it go? And we then adapt the session based on how you are. So in one context, you're very lucky to have moi as your coach. But secondly, I do think that sometimes we know our bodies, especially in this. You can sort of judge your body. I think what Josh is trying to get to is that from an actual physiological point of view, like what is the optimum for you? It's to ensure that we have got days in, even if we feel like we're doing everything okay and we're constantly doing well and we're doing well. I think measuring success and stuff is quite important in every context. I spoke to a different runner, not yourselves today, and we was talking about his running training. And I just said, well, what is your plan? What days do you do intervals? What days do you do heavy sessions? What days do you do light? And I think what we're talking about here is trying to make sure that we've considered every area, just like stress and sleep, will come into this later on. It's us trying to consider every area of equal importance in the puzzle of trying to become fit and optimum fitness. You know, how much do I need to sleep? How much do I need to recover for? How hard do I need to work each session? What do I need to eat? It's just another element that we have got room for improvement with every single client. There's always something that we can look at and we can say, actually, we can just chop and tweak this a little bit and improve on it. And I do think that would answer your question, hopefully.
Yeah, and you know, there's a lot of layers to this. So I'll cover this slide and then I'll sort of go back to a few of the layers. Jay, your camera's just come on, by the way.
So I don't know. Sorry, guys.
It's all right. I don't think anyone minds. So the two things that we need to consider is that we can achieve the actual session, the output from the session that we need. We need to be able to achieve that. If we can't achieve that, if we're not working if we are too tired to achieve that output that is going to allow you to get fitter, to allow you to move forward, then you have not rested enough. Your recovery has been inadequate. And the flip side is that after the session, you need to allow enough time for recovery to take place, but not only recovery to sort of get to baseline, but recovery and adaptation, get above baseline, like changes manifest. Now, I'm not going to go into how we do that because actually there's a little bit of a period where you train hard and those changes don't actually transfer necessarily straight away into what you're doing. I won't even look at that today. You guys realistically don't need to worry about that unless you've got any specific concerns, in which case, you know, ask away and speak to me about it another time. But in terms of what we can do to know when we're recovered enough, well, you know, there's three systems. So we can look at actual energy systems from a point of view of nutrition. So straight away we can say, right, well, if we work it out how much glycogen you burn throughout that, 700 calories from muscle glycogen, and we're going to train again within 24 hours. One of the considerations is that you need to put that back in. So that'll be factored in through your nutrition strategies to get fuel back in your system. Now, do we always need to do that? No, because if fat loss is the target, then obviously we want to create this calorie deficit. The flip side of that is that if fat loss is a target, then realistically, do we want to be overdoing conditioning work that is focused on using glycogen as fuel rather than using fat? Another debate. Again, it's something that we'll look at another time. But again, all things to consider. The nervous system recovery, if you've had a really hard training session, say that it's been a HIIT session or a sort of really high volume, heavy weight session, we know that that can be 72 hours or more that it takes to recover, to get back to baseline. Yes, the more used to that type of training you are, the less it takes, but also the more used to that type of training you are, the less stimulus you're giving your body to create any adaptation. That's why we need to be, you know, rotating through different types of training and different training phases so that you're not only working and being used to it and recovering straight away. You know, it is because if you're doing that, you're maintaining a level, and we want to be constantly moving forward if we can. And then we've got the other considerations, you know, like I said last week in last week's webinar, if I do a short run when I'm not used to running, conditioning wise, I'm fine, but my legs get absolutely battered. So it's how much peripheral fatigue have you got? How much damage to those actual muscles have you got? Do you need to wait for soreness to go away? That's going to advise how long you need to recover for. And then everything that we actually speak about today, that's going to be the main stuff, which is the stress and sleep type stuff, which is bigger picture of if you are particularly stressed and you are just not tapping into that parasympathetic, sleeping well, then your recovery time, your recovery as a whole completely needs to take priority over pretty much everything else that you do, and your training will need to reflect that. Guys, we always look at this. You don't need to know it. I just wanted to cover it before we get into stress and sleep, so that straight away it jumps out at you that these are things that you have to consider. If you are just looking at training harder and harder and harder, then that's absolutely going to end up, it's going to end in disaster, because you need to be training. You need to be creating more stimulus, which, yes, training harder is a good thing, but only if it's done intelligently and only if it's looking at the bigger picture. So before I move into sort of the stress slides, let me just see if anything's coming up in the chat. Ben, sleep, I'm going to cover it today. Don't worry at all about that. We are getting into that right now. So Jay, you, in fact, let me just cover this. One more slide, I think, on a recovery. So basically, some real simple considerations for good recovery. You need to replace the energy that you've used if that is something that you're desiring to do. So if it's fats that you're trying to burn, you don't necessarily need to replace that. If it's performance focused, then you want to replace that as soon as possible so that you can then train again as soon as possible. You need to allow tissue damage to dissipate. We need to reduce overall inflammation. And the most important factor for me is that we need to allow our body's parasympathetic or rest and digest state or recovery processes to start to kick in again. And if you are not doing that, for example, your sleep's constantly affected, that's one of the things that's going on, is that you've conditioned your body to be sort of driving up this stress state, this sympathetic state, and we'll go into that in the next slide. But if we're not controlling the nervous system, then you are simply not going to make anywhere near the type of gains, the type of progress that you can make. Jay, from a training point of view, this is it now from the recovery side of training, just to frame the entire thing. Anything to add?
No, I do think it's. I think one of the biggest things that people do is that they struggle to sleep when we've had a change in diet, a change in workload. And I had a conversation actually again today with one of the clients who was saying that he's struggling to sleep, and I said, well, if you're not controlling your recovery properly, think about if you've done a workout, not necessarily late at night, but exactly like what you're saying about your nervous system and stuff. I think you've covered everything, to be honest, but I think it's important that people bring it back to thinking about, especially at the moment, with the changing type of training, with the changing workload, the changing sort of high intensity sessions, maybe new exercises, slightly different energy outputs maybe during a day. All these things will impact sleep and stress. And it is right to bring it up at the start so people get it. So let's move on and get straight into what we're talking about.
So guys, something a little bit more. Again, it still might seem for a couple of slides a little more sort of sciencey, a bit more top end.
Just so people understand what they all are, the sympathetic and nervous sympathetic. We should have shown this at the start.
No, this is it. So basically, the look at it as it is. I tried to get the simplest slide there sort of possible to go through. The sympathetic nervous system is the stuff that ramps everything up. It's your fight and flight response. Has other things as well that you might not necessarily associate with that. But when you're doing high intensity training, this response is being driven up as well. But in general, you're increasing your heart rate, you're raising your blood pressure. Again, blood flow diverts to working muscles. We release sugars into the bloodstream. Yes, we release fats into the bloodstream, but that becomes an issue the more chronic that this becomes. Digestion starts to get inhibited. Basically, anything that is not needed then and there to run for your life in the sympathetic nervous system is starting to be shut off. The parasympathetic is the other side of it. It's the rest and digest. And what we need, it's not that one is good or bad. It's that what we need is a balance between the two. When we are training, when we are creating the stimulus, and I've put this in deliberately, is that the training, again, this side, sympathetic. This side is your parasympathetic. Sympathetic, parasympathetic, sympathetic, parasympathetic. And there's a lot of ways that we can structure the training. That's where this slides in. What this would be looking for would be basically your training there without adequate recovery time. The same one at the bottom, well, you just give it a little bit longer to recover. So you train less frequently, you train as hard. But basically, the key point is that this bit here is your stress state. This is a sympathetic drive. This bit here, as we are recovering, everything, all the adaptations that you're looking for is actually happening during the recovery state. So mega important for you guys to understand that this entire picture of controlling stress, controlling sleep, controlling recovery is going to be, and it is, and it's what I see in practice on a daily basis, is that this is the biggest factor that people miss when it comes to not getting results. If we're putting a training plan together for you, saying that plan is going to work, we've already considered this. So then it's anything additional in terms of the recovery side and things like that, other stresses that come up that get in the way that stop this from happening. So when we talk about stress, please drop it into the comments now. What would your perception be of stress? Because Jamie, we have this conversation sort of with a lot of different groups, and we've spoke about it quite a lot. I think that people perceive stress to be just a mental thing, just a purely psychological thing, where it's that I'm thinking about something, I'm overthinking about something, I'm in this stress state in my head. When in reality, it's a physiological state. We know that there's a lot of changes going on. Guys, please drop it into the comments of sort of what is
just for you, just for you, mate. I'm gonna. Obviously, I'm still recording right now, but I think that we will do this in part A, part B. So I think if we're talking about, obviously, you will need to watch part A first, but just so you know that this will be a good thing to split again in the middle like last week.